Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Cropper here with Onar, and we're going to be discussing Objectivism a la Nationalism. And is it appropriate to have, pride in your own culture, in your own nation? Is that valid, or do we have to dispense with national identity and be some sort of global objectibots? And to what extent is your local culture valid? Like, just because it's handed to you by dead people, does that mean it's important in some way? Or is it disposable? Just because those people are dead now, is it disposable? So what do we think of this, Onar? That's a good question maybe to start off with. Just because these people are dead, does it necessarily follow that everything they gave us is disposable?
I would say that you should be able to dispose some things from the past. Like, you should be able to make some judgments. But if you're born into a culture, there's some part of you that is biologically part of you, like your accent. You can't change your accent after the age of 10 or something like that. And that's just part of who you are. Now, there's no value in, no one killed anyone for the accent. There has been no genocide, accent genocide or something like that, or racist accent. That's not a thing. So can you take some kind of joy in having that kind of accent, for instance? And now that's a very trivial thing. I chose it very deliberately because there's no one would disagree with that. It's very uncontroversial.
Well, I'll challenge you with George Orwell's sentence. In Britain, everyone is branded on the tongue. If you've got a bit of a Cockney accent, you're not going to fit up in high society, are you, lad?
I see what you mean. I see what you mean. But that's different than making value judgments based on someone's accent. It's not the same as taking joy in your accent. For instance, if you have a family dinner, it's natural to think that you're inviting only people from your family to your family dinner. You have a special relationship with your family. But that doesn't mean that you're going out of your way to ruin your neighbor's family or look down on your neighbor's family. There doesn't have to be any animosity involved in that good feeling. The problem with the word pride is that we objectivists understand that as something that you earn from doing good things. So it's moral efficacy, moral causation. When you're doing something good and you see the result of good results from your good actions, then you get this a feeling of enormous, deep efficaciousness, and which we call self-esteem or pride. But so when people say they're proud of their nation, that doesn't have the same meaning. But there is a word there. And I really don't like that it's the same word as the one we use for our own accomplishments. So, for instance, when a parent, not necessarily a parent, but a friend says to some other guy he's worked hard and he worked himself out of poverty all on his own, and now he is like a university degree and got a good job. And the friend is just filled with joy on his behalf, and he says, "Oh, I'm so proud of you." He's not trying to steal his thunder or anything. He's not trying to take credit for him rising up. The intention of the person using the word pride is to give a compliment, to share his good feeling with that other person. That you are giving me very good, your accomplishment is now giving me very good feelings inside. It's like when you see a hero, you are in awe of the accomplishments of the hero.
Now, oddly, that sort of thing is kind of never in doubt. Like, you can even total lefty numbskulls can be proud of someone for being black. They see a black person at a coffee shop and they say, "Oh, you're so brave." So everybody can sort of take pride in other people. What's scary is that you're not allowed to take pride in yourself. That's the poison. That's the second half of this. That's why can other people enjoy things and etc., but you can't?
Ayn Rand actually has a brilliant phrase that has just stuck in my mind since Atlas Shrugged, is why is a cake in someone else's stomach moral, but when it's in your stomach, it's evil?
Yeah.
I'm paraphrasing here, of course. So, like, why they are enjoying it, so they are taking selfish pleasure from that cake. Well, somehow that's moral. But when you're enjoying the very same cake and having the very same feelings, then somehow this is evil.
Yeah.
So we're sort of like allowed to exchange pride, like you're proud of me and I'm proud of you, but I can't say I'm proud of my accomplishments.
Yeah.
I think that this comes down to this the very thin the what was a surface level understanding of emotions that comes with materialism, like the degeneration and corruption of the meaning of the term happiness that we have discussed before. Because now the word happiness has come to mean I feel good inside. Like I'm now some place inside me is tingling, so I'm smiling. I have joy. So joy equals happiness. But that's actually not what that means. Like as you pointed out, I like the quote from Fountainhead, where Howard Rourke has just done a building which he takes enormous pride in completing, and he's taking this solemn joy in that. And he sees some people riding by, drinking and having fun, and they're also somehow joyful, but it's not the same. So the people today who use the term happiness as synonymous with joyful, they're living they're equating happiness with hedonism, right?
Yeah, yeah. They don't have an appreciation for that deeper, larger happiness that stretches across the whole season. As Aristotle said, one swallow makes a summer's day, but it doesn't make the whole summer.
Yes, and also the thing that you can actually be quite unhappy, not unhappy, but unjoyful at a moment, but still experience a deep moral efficacy in your life. It's like there's something sad happen, but nevertheless you feel a kind of pride in your accomplishments, that you're doing something good and you're morally efficacious. That is so pride, self-esteem, and what Aristotle calls happiness. Those are almost the same thing. They're almost the same concept. And I haven't really fleshed out the difference between them. But like when Aristotle says he's happy, what he's saying is that he is taking pride in his life accomplishment of building good virtues.
Yeah, the word happy is several words put together. It's pride over time in your actions, because Aristotle said you are what you do.
Yes.
So happiness would be your actions over time being good.
Yes. And the more good things you do, the more you prove that you are an efficacious being, a virtuous being. You're all that you can be, which is this Greek concept of being the best you that you can be.
Now, do we get tied in knots a little bit here? Because then I want to say, all right, I'm going to be honest then, and I'm not going to be second-handed about my feelings. I'm going to show who I am. I'm going to do what I believe in. And then people don't like you. So then you're not involved with people because you're not willing to bend and play their mind games. And then you're excluded because you're honest and you're forward with people. So to what and then if you don't, like, then you try to not take Aristotle's advice of you are how you act, and you say, well, I'm just going to get along with the crowd, and then you find out that people don't know who you are and you feel invisible, and that's not good. Do you see the problem I'm looking at? I mean, I don't know how to get around it. We're just evolved monkeys that are just trying to do our thing, so maybe there's no way around it. But it's like, if you have integrity and you stand up for yourself, people view you as kind of dangerous You're not willing to bend to the rules of the group. You're not willing to go along with the game. You're always doing whatever you think is right, and who knows what that's going to be at any given instance, and so you're an outsider. And then you're not allowed to take part of the group.
I totally hear what you're saying, but I have a few counterexamples to that. Take Jordan Peterson, for instance. He stood up for his principles. He had integrity. He says, forced speech, that's where I draw the line in this Bill C-16 in Canada. I'm not going to allow myself to be forced to use pronouns.
He's got so many parallels with Wynand that are developing over time that it's glaring now, because he's captive of his audience. He's not in charge of that audience, you know?
Now, yeah, that's true, but like I think that he's a better person than Wynand, although I do see the parallels that you're talking about. He's better than Gail Wynand. But my point was here that he did actually stand up for integrity.
Yeah.
So let's leave aside the parallels, his flaws for a side now.
True.
Just so by standing up, he got a huge following, crowd. So in other words, it's not like if you stand up for integrity that you're going to be completely alone, but you might get a different crowd than you otherwise would. That's one thing.
To be fair, for every Jordan Peterson, there are dozens of people who have lost their jobs, and no one speaks up for them. Thousands, probably.
So, again, here's something that I like. Since we're on to Jordan Peterson here, he has a program for building up your yourself, and what he says, start small. You are a tiny speck in a very large cosmos, and the only thing you can control is that speck, right? And as you gain, and you start with a very low accomplishment, like clean your room, and once you have mastered this, you expand the circle of your influence. You're saying that now this domain I control. I'm able to do that. I've taken on the responsibility of all these things. I mastered it. I've built up my virtues. I'm a better person now. Then you expand your circle to do more than just clean your room. Then maybe now you start taking care of your family, the ones who are very close to you, because before you might have not been able to take care of even yourself. But now that you're able to take care of yourself, you include your family into this equation. And once you've managed this, and you say, okay, I feel pretty good about myself now. I'm actually able to take care of myself and my family, and I'm doing a good job. So can I now play this Piagetian game of trying to optimize my actions so that what I do that is good for me is also good for someone else? And the idea here is to say that if you're swimming in the ocean, it might be a good idea to build up some kind of close relationship with water. So if you're living among humans, it might be a good idea to include humans in your life projects. And this is a choice you have, right? So you don't have to do that, but it's very natural to do that. So at some point, you're saying now, okay, I master my own life. I master the life of taking care of my family. Can I expand the circle even more so that I include more people into my life project so that it is in my self-interest, but it happens to benefit others too? So you're playing a longer game. So you might now you're getting like not the immediate feedback, because you're not just want to get into your satiation right now for you. You have this longer game where you're valuing yourself and your family and the community around you. And sometimes winning in the long run means taking one for the team right there and then. Someone who's very short-sighted would call that sacrifice, because that's how they experience for the body. But you're understanding that if you want your project to succeed, you have to build it for the long term. So if your idea is to have the, like for instance, Jordan Peterson uses the hockey team as an example. That sometimes just trying to score yourself to be the best scorer might not be the best thing if you intend for your team to win. If you're playing on a team, if you want to get invited back to play other games, you want to be likable. You want to be someone who other people want to play games with.
Now, see, that's why I admire the Greek approach to sports so much, because they didn't have team sports.
True, but what I mean when I say game, I mean that in the Piagetian sense, because we play with each other, like girls plays together, mommy and daddy, girls and boys. Like you will be the daddy and I will be the mommy, and then there's some kind of interaction there, and that game, that playing, is about finding boundaries. When do you stop on someone's toes? If the girl typically is too bossy with the boy. No, you have to drink the coffee like this, and no, you have to go to work there. I want you to be the doctor, not the teacher. And it's like, and the boy say, I don't want to play anymore because I wanted to be teacher, and you just want to boss me around. Now then, she's losing one play pal, and this means that if she continues being bad at playing games with others, she will not get invited back into playing other games. Now, play between children is practice for human interaction as adults, right? So the idea is that you don't want to antagonize people unnecessarily. You want to have as broad a circle as possible. Scott Adams makes a huge point about this, that whenever he's talking, and he says, when you look at successful famous people, they are kind and nice to everyone. Like they don't try to separate into teams. Now you're seeing a lot of this with the social justice crap now, which is tearing down everything. Everyone hates Star Wars now because of this. So they're losing friends. No one wants to play with the Star Wars team anymore, right?
Right.
So they're ruining their own long-term game. And so one way of thinking of this being in alignment with other people is to say that one of my ambitions in life is to have projects that I benefit from that includes other people. So, like, for instance, suppose that you're I'll give you one very concrete example. There's a guy in northern Norway. He's retired now, and he likes walking, hiking. And what he did on his own, he started building out the hiking path up a certain mountain. And he did it first and foremost for himself because he wanted this. Like, he was retired, he wanted to have something to do. This was a project. Like, he could have played Sudoku, but he's decided instead to bring up like tools and start building this nice path. And after a while, other people noticed this and started using the path. And he was very happy about that because now he was making other people happy and he got respect for doing something. He didn't do it primarily for others, but he did it for himself. But he noticed now that, hey, this is something that people enjoy. So he's getting good exercise and he has an excuse to go out every day up in mountain hiking, while at the same time meeting people on the way who are also interested in hiking and talking to them, and they're treating him very respectfully. And he goes home to sleep every night feeling that he has done a good day's work, like he can take pride in his actions. And he might not have taken the same kind of pride if he was just watching TV all day, as many retired people do, right? So now, seemingly, it seems like he's doing work for other people, but he's actually not doing primarily for other people. They are an afterthought. He started with himself, built circles outward, and see how large a circle he's able to maintain. And I think that the people who are the best leaders are those who start with themselves to master their own life and just build up these larger and larger circles that they can everyone likes them, not because they're schmoozing with everyone else, but because they're genuinely likable and they're interested in other people's lives, and like they take personal joy in this kind of thing. So this is not like the soul collection of what's he called, Ellsworth Toohey.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so if we put some real life examples in, there's definitely a big difference between Steve Jobs and Bill Gates, right?
Yeah.
And
Steve Jobs was not very likable. No.
And on the surface, they're both big computer geniuses, and you know what's the difference? But as an objectivist, you look into the fact that Bill Gates was just a uncreative hack, and Steve Jobs was a creative genius. And the difference in their personalities now starts to become relevant a little bit. I don't know any way around it. You keep saying that the guy built the trail for himself, ultimately, and then he's happy other people are using it. And I very, very frequently find that we underestimate how important other people are in fill in the blank. And like if it's a factory, you're just definitely going to have other people who appreciate what the factory's built for. But even if it's a work of art, painting something that nobody ever sees is you're missing half of the meaning of the thing at least.
Yeah.
So I find other people are involved everywhere from a work of art or a poem up to a factory, and objectivists sometimes forget that. They think that they can pursue their own value for themselves, like I think of Charles too wanting to understand the history of philosophy, but to what end? It's like, what does that produce for other people in the real world? Well, why do I have to produce something for other people? Well, I don't know. It seems because you're kind of stuck in that. It seems like that's what productivity means, is to make something that other people value. And productivity, again, is our primary virtue as human beings. Productivity doesn't mean make stuff for you to consume. It means to make stuff for other people to consume so that you can trade with them and get more stuff for you. But at the end of the day, you're inside of a web of other people. You can't step out of the web or off the web. Am I being fair? I mean, am I complaining too much about the objectivists? I think about the obleftivists maybe, who just, they don't care about the real world and actually making efficacious actions out there. They just want to understand ideas.
I think it's a little bit unfair because when I listen to Yaron Brook, I hear a person who is deeply interested in other people. He's deeply engaged in the world. So I get very good vibes listening to him, even though I disagree with him on certain topics. And on certain topics, I mean, he's not a philosopher, he's an economist. So on some topics, he's a little bit weak in the philosophy, but that's okay. He doesn't pretend to be a philosopher. So I feel that there are some objectivists, like I don't want to rag on Charles too. Like he's produced a lot of good material, and like some of his videos are amazing.
Yeah.
But this attitude that you're only living on an island. You're an island unto yourself. This is what I would define as atomism, right?
Yeah.
It's not individualism. So, and I think that there are most objectivists probably lean a little toward atomism because Ayn Rand didn't specifically carve out atomism as a position that's not really desirable. In fact, when you look at Howard Roark, you can easily fall into the trap of thinking of him as just this isolated little bubble of self that doesn't care about others. But he was deeply engaged in the world, and he cared deeply about what other people felt, but not everyone. Like only the ones that he felt was on his level. It's unfair to sort of compare him to this isolated atomist, but in a novel, it's very easy to sort of stylize a person. I mean, you don't show You never see how, like, it's like in Star Trek. No one ever goes to the toilet, right? Where's the toilet?
Yeah.
And you don't want to have that in there because it doesn't add anything to the story. So you're only getting the raw story where you're filtering out all the so-called irrelevant stuff. And with Ayn Rand's Fountainhead, she has this very strong individual who's living a very solitary life from an outside perspective. And this can create this idea that this is how everyone should live, that this is an ideal for everyone. I don't think that that was what she was trying to communicate. She was using him to exemplify the individual. She wanted him to stand out of the paper. I hunt alone, right? So it means that you can be efficacious without other people. Standing out on your own. And which is why she made this second-handedness such a big topic.
Yeah, more to the point, the only efficacious people are the people who are willing to stand on their own.
Yes.
Yeah, that.
But here's what I'm going to do. Like in DIM again, like when you take the evil twin of something, you're taking something that's wrong, and then you're saying the opposite of the wrong is correct. That's the right answer. But that's very often not the case. Sometimes it is actually true that the opposite is the truth. But mostly there's a mixed bag in there. There's a misintegration, hence, and a mixed bag where there's some truth and some falsehood mixed together into one. That's misintegration. The problem is that when you then negate this, you're still going to get a bag of truth and falsehood mixed together. So, like my favorite example is like 5 in a calculation. 5 is the wrong answer, and then I'm saying, aha, I'm going to negate it, and therefore -5 is the right answer. But the right answer might be 2 or 0 or -1. Why does it have to be -5? Why do you have to take the content and then flip it, invert it, and just keep the content and with a negative sign? What do you get when you take second-handedness, where you don't exist as an individual, and you negate it?
Where then you're not connected to other people and you're only an individual.
Which means atomism.
Yeah, atomism. And neither are true.
So atomism is the negation of second-handedness, where in second-handedness you have no existence because you're living only in the people. Your mind contains only other people. You have no ideas or thoughts of your own. When you negate that, you have no thoughts about other people. You're only living in a little bubble. You're completely disconnected. Now, I'm just making up this very extreme example here to show that it's a very powerful technique how to deconstruct thought errors, because this thesis-antithesis is a common mistake throughout history. Like, if X is wrong, then -X has to be right. Then someone comes along and says, we have to have a compromise. And then you go back and forth and try to zoom into the right answer. But the correct way to view this is to say, some parts, we have to slice and dice up a misintegrated view, and we have to identify that here there was a misintegration. You put something into this integration that shouldn't be there. But if you take that out, what's left is actually pretty good. You don't throw the baby out. The baby out with the bathwater is negation. When you say that, well, you're saying that baby and bathwater don't belong together. You want to throw out the bad stuff, the bathwater, but you're just simply negating the whole thing.
Right.
And that's bad.
And that's where some objectivists go too far towards the individuation side, and sadly some objectivists stick too far on the collectivist side, on the get along with everybody side. That's a dangerous side too.
I just wanted to add that there are 2 ways of dealing with the baby and the bathwater. 2 errors, 2 common errors. One is throwing the baby out with the bathwater. That's negation. But you can also keep half the baby and half the water. You slice it in two, right?
That's what's going to happen if we keep religion.
That's compromise.
Yeah.
Compromise means you keep half of what is good and half of what is bad.
Everybody notices that religion's been going downhill while Marxism has been gaining ground. Therefore, the conclusion is, let's go back to church. And that's a lot like cutting the baby in half. It's like, don't go back to church. Don't you remember what the priests were doing?
No. That's not cutting in half because that's not a compromise. That is actually negation again, right?
Okay. They're just flipping and negating exactly what's happening. All right.
So compromise, when you're like the gray, morally gray, that is keeping half the baby and half the, so like you're saying, well, taxation is wrong. And I say, I want to have zero tax. Well, let's compromise. I'll say that you will set the tax rate at 25%. Then that's okay. So then we're like half bad and half good. So the morally gray, that is the second kind of error in addition to the antithesis. Antithesis is flipping to the other side completely. So if you say that atheism is bad, there's a lot of problems with atheism, then you flip and you become an anti-atheist, which means a religionist, right? You're going back to church. So that would be the negation. Whereas if you're saying, well, I'm an atheist, but I'm a believing atheist. We're going to pretend that religion is true, but in practice, I'm going to behave like an atheist or something like that. So it's a little bit weird to think how you can make a compromise there. But
the Jews seem to behave just that way.
Yeah. So just to pull this back to the original topic of pride. It's when someone says, "I'm proud of you," they don't mean this. I have gained self-esteem because I have been morally efficacious. They are they're commenting that you are inspiring them, that they are creating a reflection of self-esteem. It's not self-esteem, but they can see that you are, it's like art. It's like when you read good art, you get a vision of how things might be and ought to be, right? And when you see someone else doing something morally efficacious and succeeding, then you're getting a glimpse of how you might be and ought to be, right? So you're getting inspiration. So that when people say that they are proud of someone for accomplishing something, they don't mean it in the same sense, but it's related in a sense. They're sort of acknowledging that this is something you should be proud of. But since we're not allowed to say that we're proud today, you say that you are proud on their behalf, so to speak. So it's a very like a leftover from altruism. I know, I have a good example here. In Norway, there's like pietism. Are you familiar with pietism?
Piety? I mean, not.
Pietism is a religious sect or within Christianity that want to be as pietous as possible. So all joy is bad. You're not supposed to be wearing lipstick and all kind of enjoying things is against God. So you're just going around being this, like, not taking any pleasure in the world, like a walking altruist.
We had Puritan for the term for those people in America.
Okay, so that's the American term for that, Puritans.
Yeah.
Now, what happened is that in my area there was a lot of Puritans before. But they wanted to have a way of expressing joy and hedonism, but in a way that they were allowed to say it within the realm of piety. And they found a way. So when someone was cooking some food that was really, really good, you couldn't say, "This is really good food. I enjoy it very much, because then you're saying you're having joy from it. And so they say, this isn't the absolutely worst food I've ever tasted. And someone else might say, yeah, I don't feel like barfing. And a third person says, yeah, I was able to swallow it down. So they're using like this inversion. Everyone knows what it's code for saying, I like this, but you're not allowed to say that I like it. So you have to say that it doesn't disgust me, as a stand-in for the term. So that's actually one of the terms. Like, it's not directly disgusting. It sounds like, how can people give compliments like that? But that was a common thing among the Puritans. They were giving compliments to each other like this, and they were sort of feasting on it. Yes, this wasn't disgusting. So in the same term, when you're not allowed to take pride in your actions, someone else can come to your aid and say that, well, I'm proud of you. What they're really saying then is, you have good reason to be proud, but since you're not allowed to be proud, I can be proud on your behalf, because that would be altruistic. It's in line with altruism. Because a cake in someone else's stomach is okay, but not in my own, right?
Yeah, now that's an unfortunate situation. You ought to be able to be proud of yourself and your accomplishments. Now, growing up religious, there was a difference between pride and vanity, or we termed it self-esteem was like the good form of pride, and vanity is like the bad form of pride. So pride...
I like that.
Pride was like a non-value thing. It's just someone who's proud. You'd have to learn a little more about them to know why they're proud. And 90% of the time it's vanity or hubris.
Vanity and hubris, like, those are pretty good. Like, hubris is unearned self-esteem, or believing in that you're greater than you really are. That's actually unearned self-esteem. And vanity is then taking pride for, well, it's the flip side of hubris. It's not the same as hubris, but it's very related to it.
Yeah, vanity is something like taking pride in your appearance, your appearance towards other people, or what they think of you.
In other words, whereas hubris means is unearned pride, or unearned self-esteem, then vanity would be taking pride in something that is not does not requires moral moral causality or moral causation.
Yeah,
it doesn't.
Some taking pride in some surface level thing that does not actually reflect on your moral character.
So, for instance, if you're very pretty, you're born pretty, you have a very beautiful face, and if you're very proud of that, you didn't actually do anything for that. That's vanity, right?
Exactly. Yeah, unearned. The key, though.
Unearned.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that's where nobody can get away from the objectivist understanding of these, that you have to earn your virtues, and when you do, you should be proud of that. I mean, you have to be. By the nature of it, you will be. Yes,
and in fact, it's very difficult to avoid. It's almost like an automatic reaction. Like, if you're doing things in the proper way, pride just comes as a result of moral efficacy of doing good things leading to good things.
Yeah.
That's why I'm saying I'm very torn with the word pride, because I understand what people mean when they say that they have pride in their nation, or pride in their culture, or pride in their history, or pride in the accomplishments of their culture, or their, like, that kind of thing. I can say, I'm proud of the Vikings who survived for thousands of years in the cold, blah, 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 something like that. But I understand what that means, but pride is the wrong word. And there should exist a word other than pride that captures that word, so that you can express that kind of joy. Like, what you're really saying is that they had very good reasons to be proud. I'm in awe of their accomplishments.
You admire them.
Yeah. So admiration would be one way of saying it. So why would you admire someone? Well, actually, that's actually very good. That's actually admire is the correct term here, because you would never admire objectively, correctly admire someone who hasn't done anything to accomplish something.
Yeah.
Like, you don't admire someone for being pretty, born with a pretty face, right? But if someone was really fat and they were struggling really hard to lose weight, and now they're looking pretty because they have become slim and good looking because of that, then you can admire them for that accomplishment. Like, wow, look at what you've accomplished. I admire that. And that is a time where people would say, oh, I'm so proud of you.
Or I could say I admire George Washington and Thomas Jefferson and have a national pride or admiration that comes from their accomplishments. Whereas someone in Russia couldn't feel necessarily the same about Lenin and Stalin. But
no. Although they do, actually.
They do indeed. They do. True as it is.
Stalin is very popular these days, as is Mao in China.
Yeah, as we've noticed recently on this channel, the killing is a feature, not a bug.
Yep.
Which is a depressing realization, but I'm sure that's the case.
Killing is a feature, not a bug, definitely. And it's important to understand that. Like, there was a recent. We can connect this sort of to the culture right now. There was a recent poll saying that 70% of millennials would vote socialist, and 30% of them were positive to communism.
And as long as they're being told that Venezuela is having trouble because of American sanctions, and the press is keeping quiet the fact that Venezuela is being destroyed by socialism, as long as all that's being hidden from them, I don't know how it's going to turn around.
Yeah, so most of those people who say that they are admiring communism, they aren't those kind of people who would kill. Most of those. So when I've tried something with a communist once. He said, I'm a communist, or like, I like communism. And I said, okay, would you want to force people to be communists? Like, yeah, I would do that, he says, for instance. And then I say, okay, well, I can just tell you right now, that if you try to force me to live in communism, I will put a bullet in your head right there. And tens of millions of Americans will do the same. Do you still want communism? And if he then says, whoa, what are you doing here? Like that, then we can have a discussion. Then he says, I think that if you do that, then I will have to respond in kind, right? Because you can't just go around putting a bullet in my head. That's Stalin, right? Then there comes the concentration camps, and then comes the gulags and all of that, because that's the only way to stop me from putting a bullet in your head. So are you willing to put me in a concentration camp and all tens of millions of Americans to have well, if they're violating the will of the people, then yeah, they say, or something like that. Okay, Stalin. And that's the kind of people who are attracted to communism because of the killing, right? They get a rush out of there's something cool about the idea of putting people into concentration camps because they're so bad.
Bad people, yeah, putting bad people in concentration camps.
Peter Thiel said that he had a professor who said that, we talked about this, that communism lost much support in 1953 when Stalin died, because then the killing stopped, right? And so he said that the right way to think of, the right question to ask is, how much violence are you willing to tolerate to push your idea through? How much violence are you willing to use to make your ideology come true?
To force other people to adopt your ideology.
Yes. And then it becomes, once you get into that debate and you can get them down to that level, then you're getting into really good territory. Because this is the fundamental lopsidedness between localism and globalism. Like a border-minded person thinks very in terms of borders, and he thinks local. He says, "This is my little land here. I have an acre of land. I'm king here. I want to do everything here."
And what they do in China is in China, but I will worry about my region.
Right here, in this little plot of land, I'm king. You, my neighbor, you can do whatever you want on your land, but right here, I'm king. So that's localism, right? And that comes from the border-minded set. It's that you're trying to segment the world up into many local regions. Now, the globalist mindset, which is the open-minded person, he says, there shall be no borders because my border is at the end of the world. So everything is part of my garden. And this means that I want to control everything. I want to have, if anyone does anything in the world, I want to be there and have a say in that. That's the globalist mindset, where you're thinking globally rather than locally. And you don't have borders. And when there's no borders, you get to have a say in everything. And of course, these two people have very different ideas of what it means to violate the other. The border-minded person says, "Oh, you crossed into my garden. I'm going to bring out my gun now because I don't like that. Don't step into my garden." The open-minded person, the globalist, says, "Oh, you put a little wall around your little garden? That offends me because I own the entire world. And because of this, I have to kill you." So the border-minded person says, the whole world is not my domain, just this tiny little nugget. And if someone tries to enter that little space, I get angry. The globalist, open-minded person says, the whole world is mine. And if someone is trying to carve out a little tiny nugget for himself, I get angry. So the extreme lopsidedness of this is just crazy. And you can see which of these two concepts scale. Like you can have lots of localists living together.
But they're all local. They're all local from each other. They're insulated from each other even.
Yeah. So you can have the whole society filled with local properties and with local little kings in each little local property. And it works, right? Whereas if you put a room full of globalists, everyone is trying to kill everyone else.
Now, you say which one scales, and it appears that the collectivist one scales. Because
what I mean is the one that scales peacefully.
Which one is stable? The individual one, the border one. Which one scales more rapidly? The mob one, and it's destructive.
Because what happened is that when you have the globalist mindset, you get a rat race between the globalists of who is willing to murder most people. And that's the one who's going to go to the top. So everyone is backstabbing everyone. Look at what happened in the so-called LGBTQ community right now, where the gays are not happy about the lesbians, and the lesbians are not happy about the gays, and both the lesbians and the gays are not happy about the trans.
Yeah.
And no one likes the queers. So this so-called community is a social construct. It doesn't exist, and they're pretending like they're on the same team. But look at what happens now in women's sports. Now you have the trans women that are coming in and pushing aside the feminists in female sports, and so they are backstabbing ones. They are willing to put more people in concentration camps, and this escalates.
Men are leaving no room for women. We are like winning at their sports. We are the master chefs in the kitchen. Where women are nowhere. Where are women? If they're so equal and if they're so damned equal, why can't they win at sports when men invade their sports?
Sexism, obviously.
And how are we gonna conquer sexism? Oh, I have an idea. Let's ignore sex and pretend it doesn't exist, and therefore people can't be sexist if sex doesn't exist. Oh, all right. Well, then anybody can dress in women's clothes if they want. But that's where the whole problem came from.
Well, notice here that by doing so, by saying that there's no such thing as biological sex or gender, then you're saying that gays don't exist, right? Because they are attracted to the other binary sex. If you're non-binary, if you're saying that there's no such thing as a binary sex, gays and lesbians don't exist, along with heterosexuals. So it's a pecking order. And those who are willing to kill and murder most are the ones who rise to the top. Yeah. This is what happened in Soviet Russia, where what's it, Trotsky? His entire family was murdered by Stalin. Like, they tried to flee all over the world, but Stalin sent, like, he was not going to leave a single person alive in his family. Like, everyone had to go. But it's not like Trotsky was this nice guy. He was an evil murderer and monster, right? Same with Lenin. Like, Lenin took great pleasure in murdering people. And the reason Stalin became the one to take over after Lenin is because he was willing to kill more people. So this always happens then, that the true believers are always shocked. Well, why did you throw me into the gulags? I'm a good communist. Like, I understand why you are throwing the evil capitalists and the kulaks there. I understand that. Starve them to death. But why me? What did I do wrong? I was murdering kulaks by the millions. So why should I be killed? I'm a good guy.
Why not? The individual doesn't matter.
So in globalism, scales in the sense that if you tolerate it, it escalates. It's not that it scales; it escalates. You can't build a sustainable society based on globalism, but it can escalate out of control. It can spiral out of control, where the greatest murder bubbles up to the top, like in China with Mao, like Mugabe in Zimbabwe, and so forth, and Stalin in Russia. And what we see now in America is a rush to the left. The craziest person in the left who wants to do the most outrageous kind of violations of individual rights are the ones who are bubbling to the top in the Democratic Party. And so that's obviously not stable. But, like, think about it. Antifa, I mean, I know that they're basement dwellers. But if they had the ability to take control, like what happened during the Russian Revolution, that was basically Antifa, right? There was 30 Antifa guys who took control over the whole country. Now, that's exactly who they were. There's no difference between the people who ran in to take over the Duma in 1917 and the Antifa people who are now wearing masks. Now, so we can just look at what happened in Russia and answer the question: what would happen if they could somehow be able to storm the White House and take control over the Congress and the military? What would happen to America then? We would have concentration camps. They would be murdering people by the millions. So they have a murderous impulse, but they are just not efficacious enough because they're basement dwellers. They're losers, right?
Well, they're doing it in other countries. South Africa comes to mind, and they've done it before in other countries.
Yeah.
So they
So like what in America, Antifa is not yet as efficacious, right? But
I think it might be like going to the 1930s and saying the Communist Party in America is not yet big enough to do X, Y, or Z. And world events are going to move forward before communism becomes a big force in America, and then communism's not going to be a big force in America. So I think Antifa and the left are going to follow the trajectory that they did in the 1930s. I think it's going to go back out of style. It seems like it's going out of style, right? Blexit and everyone's walk away from the left.
Yeah.
So that might be the future.
That I would certainly hope so. That would be great. And hopefully we can position ourselves in the objective sphere to pick up some of that good steam. Because I see that, for instance, now Kanye West, who became a Christian, I don't mind that. I mean, it's better than what he was.
Well, I don't know. I grew up in a church, and I tell you, we are not going back to these buildings and listening to Bronze Age myths told to us by sexual perverts is not going to be, it's not a path to the future. It might be better than transvestite library hour.
That's what I'm saying. And
it's not a lot better. It's not a lot better. Those priests are utter murdering perverts. Well,
all of them. Like I understand that you've had some bad experiences in the places where you grew up, but like as I understand it, and I'm not an expert on this, but there are a lot of Christian communities in America that are quite well functioning, that are not like absolutely crazy town.
Yeah, that's because the police come in very quickly if there's anything untoward, unless they own the local police. In which case, you get the Jeff Walker situation in Utah and Colorado City, Colorado, where you had 45-year-old men marrying 12-year-old girls and consummating the marriage. And the local sheriff doing nothing because they're members of the church. So I think they're
I'm going
that
to postulate,
close.
though. Now that's obviously like a sex cult situation. And
every religion is a sex cult because when you shut down the mind,
start out. Every religion starts out as a sex cult, but as it matures and sort of grows over time, you weed out the bad stuff, and you're left with more tempered stuff.
I find the reason they're obsessed with sex is because if you shut down the mind, then the genitals are going to continue to develop no matter what. So you get a choice. Either you have mind and genitals, or you just have your genitals. And since the church has shut down the mind, they end up with people with genitals. And that's what religious people are. They are sex maniacs.
Well, I just don't recognize this from what I've seen. I understand that you've seen some things in Utah that is pretty dark here.
I'm talking more about the Catholic Church. Really?
Yeah,
and look at Islam. Islam is freaking obsessed with sex, aren't they?
Yes, but when it comes to the Catholic Church, what's interesting here is it started out with celibacy.
All right, well, we better not get too far off on this. This sex and religion should be a
yeah, we should have an own topic on that, because that's an interesting topic in and of itself.
Yeah.
But just to go back to a little bit to what we're talking about, I think that admiration, national admiration, is good. But like the thing with the word pride is that it's just one syllable. National pride. It's so easy to say, but whereas admiration, it doesn't roll off the tongue. So I wish there was a shorter and easier word to use that had roughly the same meaning as admiration.
Patriotism has it in America, but it has a bad ring because patriotism just means for your nation wherever you happen to be born. So it's got a sour.
But patriotism is not the same as admiration, because you become patriotic because you admire a nation, right? But those are not the same thing. You can admire a person, but you don't get patriotic to that person.
Well,
so
we would say good patriotism would be from admiration of your nation. But there can be bad patriotism too. You can be patriotic for Russia or China.
That's right.
And that,
So there's of course. But what I'm saying is that admiration is what leads to patriotism, right? Even though it's a bad thing that you're admiring, like admiring Stalin in the Soviet Union or Mao in China, but you can admire something without being patriotic, but you can't be patriotic without admiring it. So admiration is a broader term than patriotism. So if I say I'm so proud of you, I'm not saying I'm very patriotic with you. That doesn't make sense. But you can say that I admire what you did. That was very good. Thumbs up, like that. So patriotism is, I mean, I like the term patriotism as opposed to national pride. But nationalism then, it comes in good and bad versions, right? So nationalism is not the same as patriotism. Nationalism means your country first, America first, right? Your country first. That's basically what it means. And it's like clean up your own room first, and if you have some surplus, you can expand the circle. So in other words, it's not that you're a nationalism means no immigration, but it's like if immigration is bad for your country, then you're cleaning up your own room first, your own country first, and making sure that it works well. And then when you have that worked out, then you can open up the borders.
Yeah, I think that's what they're afraid of, is nationalism at the expense of other countries. And like Ayn Rand said, you can't stop someone from coming into your country because you think it would lower your competition. You can't stop competition dead because you think that you would be better off if you didn't have to compete.
Now, I'm sympathetic to the notion that you can't just wall off competition. But it's a special case with immigration, because with immigration, it's intimately tied up with not individual rights, but the special circumstances of your nation. Like there's a social contract involved here, and the social contract, I've thought about it. It does actually have some meaning. The people who went to war and saved your ass and your future ass by dying in combat, they get to have a say. Like say, okay, I'm gonna save America. I'm gonna go to war for America or for my country. But by doing so, I'm not gonna do that if you're going to sell my country to China. Like I'm not gonna do that. I'm not gonna do that if you're gonna open up the borders and allow all sorts of socialists to destroy my country. Why on earth would I go to war and risk my life and even die in battle if you're going to destroy everything I care about? So those people in the past who fought for the country, they get to have a say. So that's part of the national conversation. So there's a bit of a social contract there. You can't then say everyone gets to come in because there wouldn't be a place to come in if it hadn't been for those people in the past who made sure that you had a good country to live in. So that's part of the conversation. The second part is national security. Because the reason we have a nation in the first place and not an anarchist, just we're pure anarchists, is because we're trying to make the state as small as humanly possible, but not smaller. At some point, you're saying if we try to make it smaller than this, if we strip away these things, then we're not going to have a nation because some other people are going to take it over. So we need to consider national security. So the nation state exists because of national security. So it's sort of like a lifeboat ethics situation. It's not supposed to exist, but it's an emergency. The state exists because of an emergency, which is we're going to be enslaved by some other state if we don't have a strong state.
Yeah, the emergency is war.
Yes, and immigration is potentially an emergency because you're dealing with national security. You are on a lifeboat in the middle of the ocean, and it's your nation. It's very comfy, it's cozy, it's nice. You have bazaars and casinos, and it's nice. But just a little bit to your left, outside of this boat, is freezing Arctic Ocean, and you will die. So if there comes boatloads of people who look like pirates, then you might not want to take them aboard. You don't have an obligation to take them aboard if they threaten your lifeboat. And that is the big question. And if there's someone on board saying, well, we should invite them aboard, then that's fine. But then they take responsibility for those that they invite. And you have to invite few enough that you can contain the situation, right? So in other words, immigration touches upon the notion of national security, and you can't separate that from the question.
So as long as we're willing to say national security, etc., we're not going to get away from the immigration debate. The objectivists with their open borders stuff are sort of dropping the context of open what borders? The borders of our nation, right? Well, then our nation is a thing that we're going to talk about. If you want to open the borders, how much are we going to open them? Are we going to open them literally to just waves of people coming across, whether they're sick and diseased or not? I mean, we haven't done that since 1819. We slap people on the back and see if it makes them cough. And if they have a coughing fit when we slap them on the back, then we send them back because they've got tuberculosis. That started in 1819. We can't protect ourselves from diseases now? What does open borders mean? So open borders means open the borders of this country. And that would mean having at least the protection of not allowing diseased people in, for example.
And socialists are diseased people, so we can't let them in because they will destroy the nation.
Yeah, I'm really afraid of giving the government the power to turn people away based on their beliefs, because then they wouldn't let any capitalists in and they would only let socialists in. I'm sure that's how it would turn out.
That's how it would turn out. So the way you do it, you instead of saying you filter them on belief or on race or on anything, you filter them on merit, and they have to self-sustain. They have to pay their own stay. They can never ever get a single dime. And that basically excludes 99% of all the socialists, right?
Yeah, and if by chance a hardworking socialist comes who's willing to run a hardware store and pay wages, then whatever.
Okay. I'm truly of the belief that if a socialist actually does honest work, that's going to temper his beliefs.
Yeah,
right?
For sure. And a lot of socialists don't have... they don't have to do honest work for some reason. They're a professor or something.
Have you watched Tim Pool? The journalist. He's like center left. He was a Bernie supporter way back when. But he's also a business owner, like a small business owner. And he's employing people. And it's not like he's trying to squeeze every dollar out of them. But since he's actually doing real work in the real world, and has done so for his entire life, he has a sort of a basic respect for people being able to keep their own the fruit of their own labor. So even though he can be quite far left on healthcare and all of these things, he still says, look, you can't take 97% of the wealth from billionaires. They worked hard for this, right? So if that's the kind of socialists we have, people who do an honest work and they pay for their own bills, fine. I don't mind those kind of people, but they're exceedingly rare. Like a socialist that works, that's almost like an oxymoron. Because almost all working people are capitalists.
Yeah, because they understand.
Yes. So I remember I sort of insulted a friend of mine in New York when I was working there in the 1990s. And he said he was leaning left, and like we were talking a little before, and I said, well, so what's my definition of like someone on the right and someone on the left? It's very simple. Someone who makes money and has to pay taxes, that's someone on the right. And someone who doesn't make money and doesn't have to pay taxes, that's someone on the left. That's how I defined it.
There are quite a few people on the left who don't make money, but they do pay taxes on the money that they are given. And like that's a college professor. To say they make money would mean they're productive in some way, and they're not. They just are given money.
Yep.
Or government officials, too. They're just given money. They don't produce anything.
Now, what I really actually captured there is the notion that perhaps the majority, I don't know exactly how large a majority, but let's say 50%. 50% or more of the population are opportunists. In other words, they will vote based on their context. When they don't have money, they vote left. When they grow up and get a job, they vote and have to start paying taxes, they stop voting left. They become more conservative. And they're not shifting over to become conservative out of ideological reasons, but just because they're opportunistic. They don't want to pay taxes, so they stop voting for high taxes. Now, I don't actually mind that people are opportunistic to some degree. So what, as long as, like the people who vote for low taxes because they're earning a lot of money, I can't fault them. And the people who vote left wing because they don't make a lot of money, in one sense, I do understand them, but we have to still stop them.
Yeah, the best way to stop them is to have just the constitutional protections that, you would have to pass a really high bar to actually change anything significant.
Yeah.
So.
And also, one way of doing that is to make sure that as few people as possible feel any need to be opportunistic with respect to gaining taxes from others. Like if there's a lot of opportunities in the world for everyone, then it's only a very small fraction of the population who will be sadistic enough to be a socialist, right? You have college professors and all of these things. They will be socialists because they are like the Joker. They want to murder everyone because they want to have revenge on the world, on reality. And that's why they are socialists. They are unhappy that they are not the God King, the philosopher king, who gets to rule over everyone.
And they want to smash the deplorables, the lowlifes who don't understand their high ideals.
That's right. So they go around. So that is a combination of hubris and what's the not pride but vanity.
The unearned.
So they have a fantastic combination of incompetence, hubris, and vanity.
Which we can call pretentiousness is a nice way to sum it up.
Yeah, and that will make them murderers because all they see is that they see walls all around because they feel that they should be the one controlling the levers of society, but they just don't have what it takes to do that, and that makes them angry and they blame the world. Now, those we can't fix with giving opportunities. So those are like viruses and bugs and worms in the operating system. Like you need to have a firewall to keep those people out. So we just have to maintain maintenance and keep them down.
Yeah. Well, let me sum it up with one of my favorite quotes from American patriotism. The tree of liberty must be quenched from time to time with the blood of patriots and tyrants.
Very nice.
Freedom isn't free, and these people are going to be grouping up into big mobs and falling on us in avalanches from time to time. And we need to have our machine guns at ready.
Yes. And in fact, that is one of the reasons why I'm against globalism as like a global government. Because I follow the R-selected strategy in evolution. R-selection means that you want to reproduce yourself into the future. But if there's a less than 100% chance of you reproducing into the future, there better be copies of you. So in other words, if you have a high chance of dying before you reproduce, you want to have as many offspring as possible. And by the same token, if you have only one government that is classically liberal, then all it takes is some bad guy to take it over and everything is lost. But if we can have many small copies of classically liberal countries, if one falls, the other ones can still live on. Mm-hmm. So this is like the R-selection theory, R-K selection theory, and we have to be a little bit R-selected, making sure that we have spread around the world. We can't just have one great nations. We have to have many great nations or many small great small nations.
So local nationalism is a good thing for freedom.
Yes, that is just a strategy for preventing a globalist takeover. Because if we have many small viable countries, even if one of the countries falls to the globalists, then they will be outcompeted by the other good remaining nations. So, like, consider, for instance, Malaysia and Singapore. Malaysia is one of the best countries now in Asia, but they weren't. They were an awful mess. And what happened is that Singapore was just doing so great. They were picking up all the competition, they were getting everything. And of course, Malaysia was very jealous, but they had to adopt the Singapore free market model to some extent, just to keep up in the global competition. So they wanted to keep their little fiefdom there, but they weren't able to do it to the same degree. So now, because they follow the Singaporean model to some extent, Malaysia is actually one of the best countries in Asia. We don't talk about them much. Well, it's a Muslim country.
Yeah, and it's gonna have a big future. That in Indonesia, they have large populations. So,
and they're growing up, and they're doing what China did when they were copying Hong Kong. Malaysia and Indonesia have been copying, to a large extent, Singapore, not because they admire them, but because they hate them, but have to keep up with the Joneses, right?
Yeah, they have to eat. All right. Well, we have to draw a line here, Onar, and we will. What was the topic? I'll have to go back and watch this again. There was that topic we were going to get off on: religion and sexuality.
No. We were talking about objectivism and nationalism.
No, I mean the topic that we tried.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah.
And
we will definitely have to pick up on that.
For our next assignment. That'll be fun. Yeah. All right, very good. Thank you for joining me. Right. Talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining us, ladies and gentlemen. Go to Patreon and support me if you like what I do. Thank you.